Welcome back for our second deep dive.
Right.
And we're looking at influences on business.
Yeah.
This time we're tackling ethics in business.
Okay.
Not just good for the soul, but also good for the bottom line.
Right.
And you sent over some fascinating material about what ethics means in a business context.
Yeah.
Advantages and disadvantages of ethical policies.
Interesting.
And we're even going to look at some companies known for weaving ethical practices into their DNA.
Cool.
Get ready for some surprises, because sometimes doing the right thing can lead to some unexpected benefits.
It's true. There's often this misconception that ethics and profits are at odds with each other,
Yeah.
but that's not always the case.
Let's start by unpacking the difference between ethics and laws.
Sure.
I think this is where a lot of confusion comes in.
Absolutely. Ethics are guiding principles about what's right and wrong,
Right.
often based on personal or societal values.
Okay.
Think of a company choosing to use sustainable materials even though it costs more. They're going above and beyond what's legally required.
Interesting.
Laws, on the other hand,
Yeah.
are the hard and fast rules, the ones with penalties if you break them.
Right.
A business can be totally legal while still acting unethically.
I see.
Imagine a company paying minimum wage but forcing employees to work in unsafe conditions.
Yeah.
Legal, but definitely not ethical.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
So ethical behavior in business goes beyond just checking off legal boxes.
Exactly.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It focuses on treating people and the planet responsibly.
Okay.
We're talking about things like paying fair wages that actually allow people to live, providing safe and supportive work environments where employees feel respected and valued,
Yeah.
taking steps to reduce their environmental impact by using sustainable materials and minimizing pollution, being honest in their advertising and not trying to mislead customers.
Right.
The list goes on.
It sounds like a pretty tall order, especially in today's competitive business landscape.
It can be challenging, no doubt.
Yeah.
But companies can put these values into action through ethical policies.
So like,
Things like capping staff hours to prevent burnout,
okay.
guaranteeing a living wage that goes above the bare minimum,
Yeah.
or taking the stand against animal testing.
All that sounds great, but I imagine some people might be thinking,
Yeah.
isn't this going to eat into profits?
Right.
Doesn't it put ethical companies at a disadvantage?
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
There can be drawbacks.
Like,
Ethical sourcing often comes with a higher price tag.
Okay.
Think organic cotton versus conventional cotton.
Yeah.
It's going to cost more.
Right.
And those higher costs might mean higher prices for consumers,
Yeah.
which could make them less competitive. There's also the complexity of making sure your entire supply chain aligns with your values.
Yep.
It's not as simple as flipping a switch.
So navigating the ethical landscape can be tricky for businesses.
Yeah.
But are there any upsides to doing so?
There are some serious advantages, too.
Such as?
One of the biggest is attracting and retaining talent.
Okay.
When people feel valued and respected, they're more likely to stick around and be more productive.
Yeah.
And happy employees usually translate to a more successful business.
Makes sense.
Not only that, but investors are increasingly interested in supporting businesses that align with their values.
Interesting.
It's no longer just about maximizing returns.
Yeah.
It's about investing in companies making a positive impact.
So it sounds like businesses can actually future-proof themselves by being ethical.
Absolutely.
Can you expand on that?
Governments around the world are cracking down on unethical practices. So companies that are already on board are ahead of the game.
I see.
Not to mention the potential for positive publicity and a boost in brand loyalty.
Okay.
Consumers are becoming much more aware of ethical issues,
Right.
and they're voting with their wallets, choosing to support companies they see as ethical and responsible. Think about fair trade products. People are willing to pay a premium for that guarantee.
Speaking of putting ethics into action,
Okay.
let's talk about a company that's been doing this for decades.
Right.
The Body Shop.
Yeah,
They've really built their brand around ethical practices.
they have.
What stands out to you about their approach?
The Body Shop is a fantastic example of a company that has successfully woven ethical practices into its DNA.
Interesting.
Founded by Anita Roddick back in 1976.
Wow.
They've been pioneers in this area.
So early on.
From the beginning, they've been committed to environmentally friendly products, opposed to animal testing,
Right.
and using sustainably sourced materials.
Okay.
And it's not just a marketing gimmick for them.
I see.
They've built their entire brand around these values, and it's paid off big time.
What kind of impact has their ethical stance had on their business?
Their commitment has earned them fierce customer loyalty,
Okay.
giving them a competitive advantage in the crowded beauty industry. Their reputation for ethical practices also attracts top talent, and they've even been able to partner with organizations that share their values,
Interesting.
amplifying their impact even further.
Oh.
It's amazing to see how they've become an industry leader,
Yeah.
setting trends and pushing for positive change on a larger scale.
That's a great segue to another company known for its commitment to ethics,
Okay.
Patagonia,
Yeah.
the outdoor clothing and gear company.
Right.
What makes them stand out, in your opinion?
Patagonia's commitment is truly impressive.
Okay.
They walk the walk, donating 1% of their annual revenue to environmental causes,
Wow.
using recycled and organic materials in their products,
Uh-huh.
and even encouraging customers to repair their gear instead of buying new stuff.
Really?
They're not afraid to challenge consumerism and advocate for environmental responsibility, even if it means potentially losing sales in the short term.
You're right. Patagonia definitely has that reputation for being bold
Yeah.
and outspoken about their values. Remember that "Don't Buy This Jacket" campaign?
Oh, yeah.
It was a risky move, but it really resonated with their target audience.
Fit.
Eco-conscious consumers who admire their transparency and authenticity.
It was brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
Challenged our consumerist culture
Yeah.
while staying true to their values.
Right.
And it resonated deeply with their target audience,
Yeah.
eco-conscious consumers
Right.
who admire their transparency and bold campaigns.
Seems like they found that sweet spot where business success and ethical values reinforce each other.
They have.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, how do companies actually ensure they're living up to their ethical promises?
That's a good question.
Especially with the complexities of global supply chains.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot could slip through the cracks.
That's a great point. It's not enough to just slap an ethical label on something anymore.
Right.
Consumers are becoming more discerning and demanding more transparency from brands.
Absolutely. Transparency is key.
Yeah.
Consumers want to know where their products come from.
How they're made
Right.
and what the working conditions are like.
Yeah.
Companies need to be able to back up their claims with real evidence.
Okay.
And that means having robust systems in place to track their supply chains and ensure ethical practices are being upheld every step of the way.
I imagine technology plays a big role in that.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Providing the tools and systems for greater transparency.
Like what kinds of things?
Blockchain technology, for example,
Okay.
is becoming increasingly important for tracking the provenance of materials and products.
Interesting.
It creates a transparent and immutable record that can be accessed by anyone,
Wow.
making it much harder for unethical practices to slip through the cracks.
That's incredible. So technology is actually enabling companies to be more ethical.
It is.
It's not just about regulations and policies anymore.
It's a powerful tool for accountability and transparency.
Yeah.
And as consumers become more savvy and demand more information,
Businesses that embrace these technologies will be the ones that thrive.
you mentioned earlier that governments are starting to crack down on unethical practices.
They are.
What kind of regulations are we seeing pop up around the world?
There's definitely a global trend toward stricter legislation
Good.
aimed at promoting ethical and sustainable business practices.
Like what?
We're seeing things like mandatory reporting on environmental impact,
Okay.
stricter labor laws,
Huh?
and even bans on certain materials or practices that are deemed harmful.
Is there a particular region that's leading the way in ethical business regulation?
The European Union is definitely at the forefront.
Okay.
They've implemented a number of directives aimed at promoting corporate social responsibility and sustainability, and their regulations often have a ripple effect, influencing businesses and policies in other parts of the world.
It seems like ethical business isn't just a niche trend anymore.
It's not.
It's becoming the norm,
It is.
driven by both consumer demand and government regulation.
Exactly, and that's a really encouraging sign.
Yeah.
It shows that we're moving towards a more responsible and sustainable business landscape overall.
This has been so insightful. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there's always more to explore.
Right.
What's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they navigate the world of business and consumerism.
I'd encourage everyone to be mindful of the power they hold as consumers.
Okay.
Every purchase we make is a vote for the kind of world we want to live in.
Interesting.
By choosing to support ethical businesses,
Yeah.
we're sending a clear message that we value people, planet, and purpose over profits alone.
I like that.
It's a collective effort, and we all have a role to play.
That's a great reminder to be conscious consumers and use our purchasing power for good. A huge thank you to Google Notebook LM for their incredible AI assistants and audio dialogue tools.
Absolutely.
This deep dive wouldn't have been the same without them.
Their technology is truly revolutionizing the way we learn and share information.
This has been a PLC Strategy production. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of ethical business. We'll see you next time for another thought-provoking exploration.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep making a difference.
Yeah, it really does make you think about the impact of our choices.
It's true. As consumers, we have a lot more power than we realize.
Yeah.
We can choose to support companies that align with our values.
Right.
And hold those that don't accountable.
And it's encouraging to see that there's a growing number of businesses,
There are.
big and small, that are stepping up and prioritizing ethical practices.
Yeah.
It's not just about corporate social responsibility anymore.
Right.
It's about weaving ethics into the very fabric of their operations.
Yes, and I think this shift is being driven by a confluence of factors.
Okay.
Consumers are demanding more transparency and authenticity from the brands they support.
Mm-hmm.
Investors are increasingly factoring environmental, social, and governance criteria into their decision-making. And governments are stepping up with stricter regulations to level the playing field.
It's a powerful combination that's creating a real tipping point in the business world.
Absolutely, and I think it's especially inspiring for entrepreneurs and small business owners who are just starting out.
Right.
They have a unique opportunity to build ethical practices into the DNA of their company from day one.
Yeah, they don't have to try to undo years of ingrained practices.
Exactly.
They can set the bar high from the get-go.
That's a great point. It's much easier to build a foundation of ethics than to try to retrofit it later on.
But it's also important to acknowledge that ethical decision-making isn't always black and white.
It's not.
There are often gray areas.
Yeah.
And tough choices to be made where competing interests come into play.
I agree. It's not always easy to determine the right course of action.
Right.
But that's where a strong commitment to ethical principles, a clearly defined set of values, and a robust framework for making decisions really comes into play. And of course, being open to feedback and willing to learn and adapt along the way is essential.
It sounds like it requires constant reflection and a willingness to learn from mistakes.
Exactly. It's a journey and we're all learning as we go.
Yeah.
But even in those challenging situations where there's no easy answer, being transparent about your decision-making process and the reasoning behind your choices can go a long way in building trust with stakeholders.
Transparency and authenticity seem to be the common threads throughout our conversation.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Consumers are more forgiving when they see that companies are genuinely trying to do the right thing, even if they don't always get it perfect.
Yeah.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Well, I feel like I've learned so much from this deep dive.
Me too.
Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with me and our listeners.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
It's been an eye-opening conversation.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to Google Notebook LM for their powerful AI assistants and audio dialogue tools. This deep dive wouldn't have been possible without them.
They've been instrumental in helping us bring this complex and nuanced topic to life.
This has been a PLC Strategy production. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of ethical business. We'll see you next time for another thought-provoking exploration.
Until then, stay curious.